Welcome to the EMEA Recruitment Podcast, proudly brought to you in partnership with Operation Smile. We have a goal of creating 100 new smiles through our partnership. If you're able to help in any way, please visit emearecruitment.com/operation-smile. In this episode, we're joined by Tshidi Khunou, Talent Acquisition and Employer Branding Lead at Swiss Marketplace Group. He discusses the importance of mapping the person to the role during the recruitment process.
So hello everybody, welcome to the next episode of the EMEA Recruitment Podcast in partnership with our good friends over at Operation Smile. As my colleague Rose has mentioned, we're delighted to welcome Tshidi onto the podcast today. Now, he's someone who's been described by people in his network as a warrior, someone who challenges the status quo, and someone who spreads joy and positivity in all the teams that he works with. So, no pressure, Tshidi, but it's high expectations to live up to in this podcast, Noah.
Yeah, man, it's thank you so much for the welcome. I really appreciate this opportunity to actually have a conversation about interesting topics that we need to address.
Mm-hmm. No, it's really exciting. Really delighted to welcome you as a guest on the show today. And I know we've got some great questions to run through. Now, some of these questions have come from our network externally, a few internally as well. So hopefully it'll be an interesting show for yourself and the audience as well. And I think we always like to try and ease the guest into the podcast a little bit. And as I mentioned, with the partnership we have with Operation Smile, it's quite a nice question to start off with. What was the last thing that made you smile, Tshidi?
Well, this past week, funny enough, I went out to the mountains to learn how to ski. And
oh, wow.
And I think the coolest thing that actually made me smile was going through one of the steepest things and actually doing my pizzas and French fries and still be able to survive and get to the other side without actually falling. I think it was a pat on my back. I think since beginning of this year, I've decided to form what they call the year of yes, which is to try and say yes to a lot of things that actually scare me. And skiing was definitely on the top of that list. And so far, I think I'm hooked. So that definitely did make me smile.
Oh, nice. Well, like I said, I know you've been in Switzerland now for a couple of years, so you're really feeling the culture of Switzerland and getting on the ski slope. So it's I think it's a good sign that you're enjoying your time there, I think.
It's fantastic. But obviously this week has been very cold. It's a very cold week. It's where I now start missing my African roots, where I'm like, in Africa, it'll be nice and warm because it's January, because that's when it's the hottest time ever. But in Europe, obviously, it gets a bit cold around this time. But it's I'm getting there. I'm getting to the hang of, getting used to the Swiss weather and getting used to doing the Swiss things, eating your raclette and all those things. So it's getting there. It's getting there.
Nice. Good to see. I mean, there's not many places in the world that can challenge Switzerland in the quality of life stakes. And, I know so many people who moved over there and almost find it impossible to move out the country now because it's such a great standard of living for families, for, individuals. And it's just a great place to be, good economy, quality of life high, and a safe place to be, So I think, it's a good choice that you made, I'd say.
It's fantastic. I mean, even for the kids, it is really nice to raise your kids in Switzerland. Everything is available, it's safe, the transport, it's really one of those places where if you don't want to get old from just stress, you move to Switzerland. I think that's the easiest way of explaining it. If you don't want to get stressed because you're getting too old, you're getting wrinkles because you're always angry at something that's happening wrong, you just move to Switzerland. That's where you'll be a bit more calmer, work hard, but at least the other problems will sort of disappear from you.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because I mean, what was that the reason for moving in the first place? Because I know the majority of your career, obviously, in Johannesburg. So what was the reason for moving to Switzerland in the first place? Was that a main driver of it?
Yeah. Well, it's actually a crazy thing because, I mean, even when I spoke to my friends and I told them that my wife and I have decided to move to Switzerland, they looked at me like, dude, you've been working all these years to build up your career to where it is at the moment. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? And what was worse at the time was that I actually moved even without a job. I packed up my bags and I'm like, yeah, no, we're gonna go. We put our house in the market, sold our cars, sold everything, and we're like, yep, we're moving. But I think the biggest driver mostly was we have now he's 4 years, but we had a 1.5-year-old boy that really loves the outdoors, loves to play out, loves to literally do everything. And I think where we were, there isn't that many opportunities for kids his age that love to be out there in the outdoors to actually do all the things that he would like to do, ride a bike on the streets and things like that. So that was one of the things. And then the second biggest motivator was that obviously our parents, both my wife and I, are getting old. And you get to that stage where you're like, you'd like your kids to actually have a relationship with one of the grandparents at least, because, they should have a memory when they're this old of what the grandparents mean for them. And that was one of the biggest drivers. And we had a choice between either we move to Botswana, which is where my parents are, or move to Switzerland. And obviously Botswana sort of lost in this scenario. We packed up and decided to move this side. But it was more just to try and find something for my boy to actually just come and express himself. And I think the last trip that we were here, I think 6 months before for just a visit to the parents. And I saw how his face lit up when he went to the bike parks and all these things. And it's things that I knew didn't necessarily exist where we were staying. And that for me was like, you know what, if this is what he wants to do, why not? I mean, we might as well just pack up and leave. And also it was the middle of the pandemic. And there, I think in South Africa, the rules were a lot stricter, more than most countries. A lot of the stuff where the government really wanted hard for a lot of people. It became really, really hard. So that was a lot easier to pack up. But I will say, traveling in the middle of a pandemic, not fun. It is not fun. It's not recommended. I would not recommend anybody to do it. It is not fun at all. It was really, it was bad because we had to come with repatriation flights, and those come with their own issues. So, but yeah, it's been a good move so far. It's been a very good move.
I mean, it's really interesting because although the topics we've been talking about are quite different, the skiing and then the relocation, but they're both things that ultimately, are pushing you out of your comfort zone. There's so many people that wouldn't have moved jobs during a pandemic, but especially not moved jobs, moved to a different country with a young child without the security of a job to move to. So it's there seems to be a bit of a common theme in what you're saying. And I know one of the questions I was going to ask you in the conversation a little bit later on, but actually I think it's probably a good time to ask it now, is relating to your YouTube channel, because I mean, again, this is something that would scare people, to get in front of a camera on a regular basis and to have their views and face out in the general public on YouTube. And it's something quite unusual. I mean, I don't know many people in talent acquisition that have done this. So, I mean, what was the driver for it? Because the show is called Top of the Morning. It's obviously very related to career advice, career help, and helping people find jobs, present themselves in the right way. So, but what was the driver to actually get in front of a camera and put something onto YouTube? So I think one of the biggest things that I realized was, so I've been doing recruitment for, I think, over 17 years now. And one of the things that I've actually seen, or some of the biggest fights I've had with line managers in the past, has always been about, candidates and what candidates have said in the interview and what they haven't said. And because a lot of line managers are based on, they've got ideas of what they want you to say in some of the interviews. And then you leave the interview and they haven't asked you a specific question. However, if they would have asked you that question, they would have actually found out that you're capable of a certain skill. And then you get to the debriefing with the line manager and they're like, I don't think this person can do this. And you're like, but you didn't ask them. You can't say you don't think somebody can do this if you haven't asked them the question to say, how would you deal with X, Y, Z? And
And for me, that was one of the biggest drives to say people lose opportunities not because they're not capable, but they lose opportunities because there's too many managers that assume things and make assumptions about what you're capable of doing. And nobody ever tells candidates this information. Nobody ever tells candidates to say, if you had to go to an interview, these are some of the things you should focus on. For example, if you're giving an answer about a question that a manager is giving you, an example is always important because an example gives you an opportunity to be able to explain things that they haven't yet asked you. And then I used to do that now on a status on LinkedIn, where I used to just type it, and it just got so much popularity. A lot more people started engaging with it. A lot of people started asking for more information and saying, please elaborate further. And then I also then realized, you know what, it's taking a lot more time explaining some of these things by typing responses to all the questions that I'm getting about the same topic on that. And then one day I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to grab a camera. So I got my phone, put it in front of me, and I recorded this thing. It was shocking. I mean, if you go back to like my first videos, they were really, really shocking. But what I didn't care about at the time was I didn't care about what it looked like. I didn't care about the lighting. I didn't care about anything. All I cared about was if I can get this information that I've got in my mind after like more than 17 years of working in this particular space, and it can help one person, then I've done my job. And then from there, that's why, because the status that I used to always have, I used to start with top of the morning and then the question. And then I realized that more and more people started actually searching for top of the morning on LinkedIn to try and find anything that I've written. And then I was like, okay, cool, this works. I mean, when I started the top of the morning, I had about, I think, 3,000 followers on LinkedIn. And I think now I'm sitting on about maybe 28 or 29,000 followers on LinkedIn. All because people just wanted to hear stuff that had nothing to do with the companies that I was working for, but opportunities that they were looking everywhere else. So I started addressing that. And then I also realized graduates, for example, were having some of these basic problems because with graduates, I mean, you've just finished your university degree. You don't know, you have never worked. You don't know how to address certain questions. So that's where the birth of Top of the Morning with Tshidi came from. It was literally just from realizing that a lot of people lose out on opportunities, not because they're not capable, but because somebody just failed to ask them a basic question to say, what can you do if something like this happens? And then that's how I actually got into this. And I think I've invested a lot of money on it, and I'm loving doing what I do because I still get messages from people saying, hey, thank you for this. I've just got a job, or thank you for this. I've got that job. And for me, that's more fulfilling than anything else, because if in a month, one or two people can actually use my videos to learn how to do things differently, then I've done my job. I think I've succeeded in a lot of things. So that's where this crazy idea of putting a camera in front of me and recording things and spending hours at night trying to edit it comes from.
No, it's really cool, and I think the fact it's unique as well. As I say, I mean, as far as I'm aware, there's no one else in my network, at least in Holland and Switzerland, that do something like this. And I think it helps you stand out, but it also, I think, helps the companies you're working for stand out as well indirectly, And I think it helps, obviously, then the interviews go better with yourself and with the company, because people then have a bit of a feeling for who you are, and the fact that they can see your purpose and the reason why you're doing this is to help people, either get a job or to help the person who's interviewing to interview in a more efficient fashion. And I think it is, because it is something. I think when you're in the job day in day out, you sometimes. It's easy to forget that the majority of people, don't change jobs for very often. It might be something they do every 2 or 3 years, maybe even longer than that. So where even the most experienced and seasoned professionals going out on interviews have nerves going into these meetings, because it's not a situation they're in very often. It's out of their comfort zone, going back to something we talked about earlier. So anything you can do kind of help on that is a big plus and beneficial. So it's because it kind of links in to a question I was going to ask you about the the move into talent acquisition in the first place? I know you follow people like Tony Robbins and Simon Sinek, or who are their model is very driven by purpose and the reason why, and then if you get that right, then everything else kind of flows into place and you do the job well. So I thought it'd be quite nice just to hear your how you ended up in talent, whether it was something that you actually always wanted to do, or whether it was something that I guess in most cases people end up just falling into a job and it changes the next 30, 40 years of their life, so yeah, which was it for you really?
So talent acquisition, most of us always comes as a mistake or as it's never planned. I think only now is starting to become a career that people can actually follow. And the way I actually got into that space was because when I was at university, my university was still brand new in South Africa. It was an Australian university. It was still new. And I literally wanted to make a bit of cash. So I used to work in the call center. And the call center that we used to do is we used to literally call all candidates that or future students that had actually applied to come and study with us. And we used to check when they're going to pay the fees, what support do they need, what is this, what is that. And I did that for about 2 years because I did that towards the end of my first year. I did that for about 2 years. And as soon as I finished my university degree, the guy who was our manager at the time said to me, hey, listen, there's a new job. We're looking for people that can actually look for students throughout most of South Africa and Southern Africa. Are you interested? And I was like, of course. So I went through the interview and finally got the job. And that's literally how talent acquisition got into the space. And then I think 2 months after I started, the guy that used to look after recruitment throughout the whole of Africa decided to then leave the company. And now my boss is like, listen, you're the only one that's got like more than at least a month experience in going to, high schools and presenting to students. Would you like to go to Ghana, to Nigeria, to all these countries and actually go tell students about who we are? And I was like, of course. So I did that for about 6.5 years, literally traveling throughout the whole of Africa, going to a bit of the Middle East, going into a bit of Asia, going into Australia, just to literally talk about university, the Monash University, and tell these guys about the university to say, hey, this is who we are. And I got to a point where, because I now started looking after the whole of Africa region, so all the other campuses would send their requirements to me. I was the regional manager for Africa, and so I started looking after the PhD guys now, the masters, all those different high levels to say to them, hey, listen, if you want to do a PhD, we can sponsor you, we can do this, we can do that. And then after 6.5 years of literally living in a suitcase, I got tired of it. I really, really got exhausted. And then I went to work for a recruitment agency. And my job there at the time was just to look after SLAs, service level agreements with agencies. It was probably one of the most boring jobs I've ever done because all I did was sit in a lovely room because I had to close my door in and read through contracts to negotiate SLAs with recruitment agencies. With companies where they'll send me a 70, 100-page service level agreement for us to sign. And then I'll have to go through everything and highlight this and highlight that and say, no, we can't accept that. We can't. And then after a year, I got tired, then went into graduate recruitment. And that's literally my journey into the talent acquisition space. So it was one of those things where from university recruitment to this, to that, to that. And now I've been in it for quite some time, more than 15 years. And then what was also then interesting is I've also had opportunities where people have said, listen, what about HR? Why don't you get into the HR space and become an HR business partner and this and that? And then I realized the reason I don't think I'd be able to get into the HR space is because talent acquisition, you never feel like you've completed anything because you're as good as your last placement. You place somebody today, that's not the end of your journey. Like tomorrow, there's another challenge. The next day, there's another challenge. So there's that little weird want to always do different things and learn different people and do different challenges and this and that. And that's basically why I'm still in the talent acquisition space because it's just too awesome. It's too great. When you find that candidate that actually needs an opportunity to change their lives, and you are able to give them that opportunity. I mean, it's exhilarating. It's one of the best feelings in the world to actually see somebody who, listen, I'm now heading up this department, and this is one of the most impossible roles to ever do, and it was because of what you've done. So that's basically where the talent acquisition comes in, and that's why I love it. And also the other thing that I've also realized is it is the one area within the human resource capital that is misunderstood. And it's actually misunderstood because we as talent acquisition professionals do not share information about what it is that we do. We are the worst human beings when it comes to sharing that. We don't share information about what we do. We don't share information about how we do things. We don't talk about anything that, we would like to actually share with candidates. And I think we would be more forgiven for all the wrong things we do if we shared more. And that's also why I'm still going to maintain to have this YouTube page, because I just want to take out the stigma or the conversations that are not necessarily understood about talent acquisition and explain them differently to the different candidates. I mean, one of the videos I did last year was, what is it that we ask your referees when we actually call them? Or who makes a decision on an offer? Or who does this? Who does that? Just that little bit of information has actually been helpful. So like most people in talent acquisition at my age, it always comes as a weird little, hey, would you like to try this? You like to talk a lot. Do you want to be a talent acquisition specialist? And you're like, oh, okay, let me try it out. And then you're stuck there forever. So yeah, that's been one of the, but now at least it's changing. More and more people are coming up and saying, I'd like to get into the talent acquisition space.
Yeah. No, I think everything you said there, you probably can see me nodding my head in agreement. I've experienced all these things you're talking about, and I think with talents, it's one of those roles that the products. If you look at people, most jobs, if they're trying to work with, if people are working with a product or a service, that product or service doesn't have an opinion of its own, whereas obviously in recruitment and talents, you're having to really get to know people very well and to find out what the drivers are and ultimately to do the best for them, which is good for them, but also it keeps the other person on the other side of the table happy, the line manager who's hiring the person, and it can have its challenges. You have your ups and downs like in most jobs, but you get a lot of variety, and as you say, it's a very far cry away from sitting in the small office, going through a tick list of SLA agreements, which, again, that doesn't sound the most exciting thing to be doing. That's good. And I thought I'd kind of almost fast forward to present day, to ask you how it feels now to be in your role of recruitment and branding at SMG, really, because obviously, since you've been in Switzerland, the move to Lonza when you moved over, and now SMG is still relatively new, I guess. So it's how's it feel to be in this role?
Yeah. So I think working at SMG, to be honest, has been one of the best challenges anybody could ever have, and I think it's been an amazing challenge, mainly because I joined the company 6 months after it was formed. So this was a company that already had very strong brands. I mean, for most people that don't know, SMG literally became a combination of two main big businesses that existed for some time, which was Scout 24 Switzerland, as well as some of the TX Markets businesses. So they literally brought these businesses together and said they need to form into one. And this was completed in November last year. So when I joined literally at the time where 6 months later, we were like figuring out, our brand identity, and we're still trying to figure that out. We're still trying to make sure that there's a sense of understanding of who we are and what we're capable of doing, without obviously losing the old ways of doing things and without losing some of the great things that we've done in the past. And so it's been a nice challenge, mainly because of that aspect. Because one of the first things that when I started, we had to focus on was, what systems are we going to use? Our applicant tracking systems. What are we going to do? How are we going to put everything together? acquisition, putting together the recruitment processes, all these things. And I think it was such a nice thing to actually remind myself of, because when you've worked for certain companies that have existed for such a long time, a lot of those things are normally there, and all you have to do is just tweak here and fix this and fix that. But when you're building everything from scratch, it's literally one of those things where sometimes you're sitting at home and you're thinking, but why haven't I done this way? And then you realize you only have a certain number of hours. You've got like 8.5 or 9 hours in a day to actually do all that work, and you still have to do this and educate and this and that. So it's been a really nice challenge to actually get myself into. And I think what's been very different, to be honest, is trying to learn a bit more about recruiting in Europe, and some of the different challenges that, European countries have compared to, the challenges that we had in South Africa, because they're distinct and very different. The art of recruitment is exactly the same, but the challenges are slightly very different. So I think those are some of the most interesting things where I had to try and learn a bit more about the laws of each one of the countries that I was looking after. I mean, when I was at Lonza, I was lucky that, for example, I worked on trying to build an office in Italy, and that was literally a brand new office to try and hire IT skills in that particular space and try and get the guys to that particular office. And then here now at SMG is the ability to now try and say, how do we build a company that's got such strong brands in a market that is got so much competition, and how do you make sure that people actually understand what your brand stands for, and to build a plane while you're still flying it, or you're flying a plane while you're still building it. And that's basically one of the nicest things about that, is to say, at times when we reflect on what we've done in the last 6 months, where my team and I are like, listen, we've done miracles in this short period of time, because, to be able to identify a new system, implement a new system, make sure the system is running, train managers on the system, like from an ATS point of view, most companies take about 2 years to actually get to that stage. We did that in less than 3 months. Those are some of the things that we were like, okay, sometimes we're like, not bad. It's been a fantastic journey to actually get to where we are. And we know we still have a long way. I mean, this year, for example, we're now building on our employer branding and getting our employees to help us actually speak about what the brand is and what it stands next level, which is the employer branding side. And that's the nice, challenging things that we've done. So it is fun to actually work for an e-commerce company that is trying to change people's lives. It's been fantastic.
And again, I think it's aligned with some of the other things you mentioned, in terms of the way you've approached life in general, because with the startup situation, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on, as you mentioned, putting in new processes, procedures, systems, bringing in the talents, and a lot of people will say they will be interested in this and want to join, but then when the reality hits and they realize actually there's no one to delegate to, and you've just got to do these very basic things yourself. It's exciting environment, but very hard work and really pushes people to their limits. So I mean, I suppose a lot of what you're doing when you're evaluating the role yourself, or when you're bringing in new people, it's really around the cultural fit, I suppose.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, one of the things that you mentioned there is like, it's easier to be called and say, come and become a lead for this particular company, and there's going to be amazing, challenging things, and you're like, fantastic. And then you get there and you have to put together a policy from scratch, and there's nobody to delegate that to and say, hey, listen, do this. You still have to do a bit of recruitment yourself. You still have to do this. You still have to do that. I think it humbles you a bit as the leader sometimes to just remember the basics. And I think that's one of the nicest things that I think I'm enjoying about. And also just having a great team. I mean, if you have a team that's out there and betting with you and running with you and trying to build with the same mindset of the challenges, that becomes a very, very nice challenge. But you are right. I think one of the things that it's easier to look at it on paper, where somebody's like, oh, you're going to come and build this. And you're like, fantastic, I'm going to do this. And then you get into the role and they're like, oh, by the way, while you're building this, please know that you also have to clean that corner and clean this corner. Oh, by the way, don't forget that one. And you're like, but I didn't sign up for this. And they're like, but you did. You said you could do this. Like, you can't turn around and say you can't do that. So it's a very good way of just remembering where you've started from a career point of view. And I think that's been one of the nicest things to just try and start building and building and building and just getting, your brand to understand who you are locally and internationally. So that's been one of the fun things.
And I guess this leads quite nicely onto a question I had about recruitment in general. I mean, obviously, you've had experience in big companies, in startups, and various challenges in both scenarios. But what do you think are the key steps to having an efficient and effective recruitment process? To get the right people in, but also ideally to retain people for a good period of time.
So I think one of the things that I've realized, especially in the last maybe 5 years of my career, is candidates and potential employees are more forgiving if you are truthful about the challenges that you're experiencing as a company. I think one of the in my earlier years, I think what I learned was you get taught that recruitment is about selling. It's about selling ideas and convincing candidates to come and join your company. And I think in the latter part of my career, I've now learned that that's actually not the right approach, because then your retention is shocking, because what you did was you sold ideas about how amazing the company is, and you didn't tell people the truth about some of the challenges that the company is experiencing. And then people come here and they're like, you didn't tell me that there's no door in that. It was important at the time. So I think that's been one of the nicest things that I've learned about, if you really want to retain the talent that comes and joins your company, key thing as a company is to make sure that in your recruitment process, because people that love the challenge will come for that challenge because of the honesty. Don't hide where you're having challenges. Don't hide issues that you're having as a company. Make sure that you come out and ask the people to say, this is basically where we are. Is this something that you're interested in? The second thing that I've also now learned is, and it's a question that I normally ask candidates or anybody that I speak to, it's never about, you've applied for this job, tell me why you want this job. Because I've realized that question is a very horrible question, depending on where the person is in their mindset and what they're looking for from a career point of view. The one biggest question that I normally ask them is to say, I know you've shared your information with us, but what is ideally the best opportunity for you and what does it look like? And with that question, you then get a lot more unfiltered feedback from candidates that tell you, listen, I've got 2 kids and I really want a job that's going to give me this kind of flexibility, this, that. And with that, as a recruiter, you then go back and say, cool, I understand you've applied for this job. However, based on what we're looking for, this job requires this. Would you be interested in this other opportunity? Because now you're now no longer mapping the job to the person, you're mapping the person to the right job. So those are some of the things that I've actually learned, especially in the latter part of my career, to say the questions that we ask in recruitment need to evolve a bit, because we literally are stuck in things that were written in 1945 and we stick into them and we're like, we're going to keep asking the same question and try and trick candidates and try and find if they can. No, it's no longer the time. And especially now where there's a lot more flexibility, a lot more conversations about flexibility. It's about now asking the right questions. And as a fraternity or as a profession, talent acquisition needs to, we need to have conversations with ourselves as an area to say, guys, are we still asking the right questions? Is there better ways of doing things from a future point of view? Instead of saying, you've applied for this job, what can you do for this job? It's about saying, oh, you've shared your details. Now, what would you like to honestly really do? Besides the fact that we know you're looking for a job, but what do you want to do? And then you start really mapping people to the right careers instead of making jobs to people, because then that's where the problem comes in. So that's been one of the most interesting things that I've I've been learning in the last couple of years, and I think I'm loving the phase and the kind of answers, because then my honesty then goes back to the individual, where I tell them about what challenges that we then have, and then they make a decision as to whether that is the right role for them based on what that career is about. So it's no longer about, we want to regret you. We want you now to make the right decision for you and where you are and the phase that you are in from a career point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, all this makes sense. I mean, I think that because one of the biggest costs for a business is if people are hired that missold a role, or that it just doesn't work out in the short term. And one of the biggest costs is that short term issue. If somebody joins and it's not for them, and then they move on, it's not just the issues and time and cost of that one individual. It's much broader than that. So hiring the wrong person is much. It's better to wait for the right person than hire the wrong person short term. But I think it's always tough to kind of evaluate what is the cost, the true cost of the wrong hire. So I've struggled with the answers to this when I've been asked this by people. So I thought, who better to ask than somebody else on the podcast? So what do you think actually is the true cost of the wrong hire? What do you bring into that equation, really?
I think one of the things that we can't always quantify with the wrong hire is the effect it has on the team. And I think that's been one of the biggest things. I mean, it's easier to quantify what work an individual would have done if they were in the job for a period of time. It's easier to quantify any sign-on bonuses that you've actually paid that individual. But what we haven't or what we cannot quantify, unfortunately, from now to the future, is the effect that individual has in the team. Because one of the things about bad hires that I know we never really admit is the fact that a bad hire can come into a fully functional team and destroy that team because of what they've actually now started complaining about to other individuals. A bad hire can come in and change the morale of the team. A bad hire can bring in a lot of concerns, questions, queries, problems into that particular team and the synergy of the team. And those are much more, like a lot more expensive to a company than just being able to do a golden shake and saying, listen, it's not going to work. Goodbye. We're going to pay 3 months extra so you can go look for another job. That part is easier. We can quantify it. We can put it in the accountings and say, listen, unfortunately, it didn't work out and we had to pay this person to actually leave the company. So that's one of the things that we need to actually look at. But a bad hire for me, it's been one of the things where I've actually been very conscious of the fact that with bad hires, you are more likely to lose some of your best talent in that particular time. And it's the same as promoting the wrong person within a company. If you promote the wrong leader, just because they're capable of doing that job very well, but they don't have people skills, that can also destroy the whole company. Because then what we normally say is sometimes people don't leave the company, they leave you as a leader. And that's what, when we start now counting and calculating the cost of a bad hire, unfortunately, even ChatGPT can't tell us how much we can quantify that. But it's one of those things where I honestly wish we could find a better matrix of calculating what a bad hire could actually do. And that's why we always sometimes say, we need to make sure that we hear other people's opinion when it comes to hiring decisions, because I've seen people that want to make a decision by themselves because they know it all and they've been doing this for a very number of years, and they don't realize that they've got a bias in how the kind of person that they hire that could come in and literally destroy what they've been building over the last couple of years. So it's a very tricky one, and I think if we were to ask anybody about the cost of a bad hire, in talent acquisition, we need to also figure it out ourselves, because I think we can quantify other things. We can quantify how much we had to pay the individual, the cost of what the recruiter had to spend, the cost of time that you spend in hiring this person, because we can calculate it based on what we pay the recruiter to say, based on, this time that you've actually dedicated to this role, this is how much we've actually lost as a company. That's easier to quantify. But the reality is the other costs are very difficult to quantify. Like you literally will lose your mind if you just start seeing somebody that's come in and you had a team that was absolutely functional and doing an amazing job, and then 3 people leave within the first 6 months of that person starting. And then that is the real cost of a bad hire. Yeah.
That's it. I think you're right. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, it's almost the opportunity cost that is the thing that's difficult to quantify, because so much time and effort goes into onboarding a new person, and then, as you say, the morale and the productivity of everybody can struggle if that person then suddenly moves on for whatever reason. Sometimes it can be just one of those things that it's just not the right fits. And it's it's very, very difficult. But I think that's one of the things that I personally really like about the Swiss markets. I mean, generally the pace of a recruitment process is slower than a lot of other countries around Europe. But at the same time, we do tend to find that largely the success rate of people retaining the business and stay is higher as a result, and I think there is that kind of trade-off. Although we all, I have plenty of clients that call and say we want this role filled yesterday, but the reality is, it's taking a bit of time on it is the right thing to do, although it sometimes doesn't feel like it's never the time. But and I think obviously you touched on it a bit earlier, the different way of working now that has come around largely because of the pandemic. I mean, obviously, there's plenty of interview processes that went on over that time where nobody met in person, hires were made on using video calls, and I suppose we're only going to see how successful that was in the next few years if people stay in those roles, but obviously we have other things with BI and data impacting on our lives and all the disciplines. So I thought I'd kind of ask you a bit about that, really. I mean, how do you see technology, BI and data kind of impacting on talent and HR over the coming years? And are there any positives or even negatives you see from it, really?
I think there's quite a lot of positives that BI and data will have on talent acquisition, as well as just HR in general. As much as I see there's a lot of huge benefits, I don't think we are also ready to use the data from a talent acquisition space. I don't think we use the data enough to tell us things that we're not yet ready to actually hear from a business point of view. I think a lot of the times we use data to tell us the matrices about, time to hire, this and that, all those things. So it's easier to pull data and say, tell me about the time to hire. And then it tells you all these things to say, it took you 6 weeks to hire this kind of skill. It took you this, it took you that. Where the data is actually, unfortunately, not being used as the information that it gives you regarding what the other competitors are doing. The data based on the kind of skills that you're receiving from the recruitment agencies that you've partnered with. Because one of the things that I think for me I've been a strong supporter in is a company as small as SMG should not have more than 10 to 15 recruitment agencies. Because the moment you have that, you don't have a relationship with your preferred supplier. What you've got is shoot on the wall and hope something sticks. And what you really realize is that recruitment agencies, when it comes to data that they've got, the information about what people speak about your company in general, what that information, not many companies will come to a recruitment agency like yours and say, hey, listen, please tell us, what are people saying about us as a brand? What are people saying that they're not telling me as a company? Because in most cases, you'll find that we only know data of people that interact with us, but we don't know data of people that interact with our external suppliers. So that's why I think it's very important that going forward from a data point of view, and when we talk about the BI and the data and the analysis, I think a lot more relationships that we need to have with our preferred suppliers should be based on that kind of conversation to say, forget the fact that you haven't placed anybody, or forget the fact that, you've played this person and, you've got 10 other jobs. That is important. You can fill those people, and we love the fact that you'll be able to do that. However, what we're interested in as well is a lot more high touch conversation, is to say, what is it that you know about my company that I don't know? What is it that you hear about my company that you know that I will never ever hear from any candidates that we actually know? Why would somebody go to another company versus my company that you are aware of? And I think if we can start having those kind of conversations with our preferred suppliers, it will really change the landscape, because now it's no longer about who interacts with my brand, but it's about who doesn't want to interact with my brand. Who is it that doesn't want to interact with that brand, and why don't they want to interact with that brand? And that's the aspect where we now use that information from an employer branding point of view to say, if they don't want to interact with my brand because of a perception about what the brand stands for, then how do I make sure that I convince them that it doesn't matter whether they interact with my brand as a potential employee, but what I would like them to interact with that brand as is potentially a customer in the future. Because I think we put our mindset as talent acquisition to say, we worry about people that want to be our employees. That shouldn't even be the case. It should be about who is it that doesn't want to necessarily work for me, but is willing to actually use my brands and my products and this and this and that. And those are the people that we also want to speak to say, how do we make sure that they understand that even if they don't work for us, there's other amazing things that they could actually benefit from a company like ours. So I think for me, that's the data that honestly, if we were to have monthly or quarterly conversations with our preferred suppliers, that's the information that I think for me would actually be absolutely critical, because we take that information and package it in such a way that we then support them to do their jobs better. Because if we don't listen to what you guys are saying about our brand, and we keep on saying, hey, listen, I need to fill this role urgently. You're like, listen, nobody's biting. Nobody wants to work for you. And I still don't listen to why people don't want to work, then I'm wasting my time. So I think for me, that's the mindset from a talent acquisition point of view that we need to have. We need to change how we look at data and start challenging these things and asking these kind of questions to say, what do you know that nobody else is telling me? They always say, as a leader, if your team doesn't complain, especially to you, just know that they're complaining to somebody else.
That's very true.
So if they're not disagreeing with you, they're not complaining about something, they're not saying anything to you as a leader, don't worry. It's got nothing to do with you. They're not complaining to you because you are the problem. They're complaining to somebody else about something else. So that's how I think companies should start using data, as to say, if you're not talking to us and you're in the market, why is it that you're not talking to us? Why would EMEA, for example, take you and give you to another company instead of giving you to us at that particular time? What is it that company is offering you that we can offer you as well from a career point of view? And those are the questions that we need to start honestly asking ourselves going forward.
No, and I think linked to this as well, I think it's something you mentioned on one of your recent YouTube programs. It's about the actual experience when the candidates are going through the interviews and knowing that, if you're the majority of people you interview, you're not going to hire. There's only so many positions that are available, or so many great people that fit the culture. So I think it's important to make sure the people you don't move forward with have that great brand experience as well. So then they're your salespeople, if you like, in the market. Because even just do that relatively basic thing right is something that a lot of companies struggle with. There's so many. The subject of technology, it's so easy now for companies to put jobs onto LinkedIn and have hundreds of applications, but sometimes it can be damaging to the reputation if people apply and they either hear nothing back or they get an automated response back. Then there's only so many times someone's going to do that until they think, well, actually, my impression of that business is now damaged. And again, it does come back to something else you mentioned about the honesty in the process. I think if someone isn't right, then as long as they know they're not right and they know the reasons, they may not agree with them, but as long as they know that, then I think that's, again, something that it's a decent kind of human skill that actually most companies, don't follow through with. So it's, it does seem like a solid model you've kind of got in place there, really.
I think we're trying, and I know we've got our own problems and our own issues that we go through and the challenges that we've got. But to be honest, I think what we really try to do as much as we can is to become the champion of those that don't have a voice. I mean, as talent acquisition, if you never disagree with a line manager and all you do is always agree, then you're in the wrong profession. I mean, you're doing a very job. You should just go become something else. Just go become a preacher or something along those lines, because part of your job is to champion for employees, and to actually have tough questions and tough conversations. And where you got the decision wrong, also as a talent acquisition specialist, it's about being able to say, listen, here, nah, I didn't get it right. I actually messed up. And I've realized, I mean, in all my career, every time we've ever done anything wrong and we've actually made a bad decision and we've actually maybe treated a candidate not the way that they would like to be treated. And every time I've ever picked up the phone and called a candidate and say, listen, I'd like to apologize. 99% of the time, just that phone call alone gets me other referrals, and they're more forgiving because I was clear and honest and say, listen, here we dropped the ball. And I think it's the same as just relationships with friends, where you do something wrong to your friend, being able to just pick up the phone and say, hey, listen, I messed up. Sorry about that. This wasn't, or we as a company dropped the ball here and we shouldn't have done that. I've realized that a lot more people are more forgiving when they hear you say that than if you just try and ignore it and hope that, they never come up and never give you any reviews. And I think that the reality is we're now living in a world where people can review you everywhere. They can go to Indeed and Glassdoor and anywhere and just review your company and talk about what your company is doing to them. And you find, if you're able to sometimes pick up the phone and say, listen, I'm sorry about that. It changes people's mindset about your intentions, because a lot of the times as a company, there's always an assumption of bad intentions until you pick up the phone and say, listen, I'm sorry, we really shouldn't have done that. And then people realize that there was good intent, but it was delivered in the wrong way. So I think that's where, from a talent acquisition point of view, we need to just tweak one or two of things and just realize that the same way that I treat you is the same way that I wish, as a talent acquisition specialist going for another job, I'll be treated. That's all I ask. Is like, if I want to treat you badly, then I shouldn't expect to be treated any different when I go and apply for another company.
No, I can imagine, if the people listening to this will say, well, that this approach is excellent. I don't think there'll be many people who would disagree with the approach. But the kind of questions I was going to ask near the end were related to, I suppose, a bit of time management and how you plan your day, which is a bit related to this, because I can imagine that, so everyone would agree with this, but then the argument would be, well, I haven't got time to go and call all the people that have been rejected, or just keep this going. So, I mean, is there something that you've learned through your career in terms of time management and prioritizing things that allows you to work with this model, but also to have some kind of life as well? There's one thing we'll all have equal amounts of, and that's time. So how do you tend to prioritize what you're doing in the day, really?
I think one of the things I try to prioritize is identifying where we've done wrong, because bad famous newspapers, they'll tell you all about the bad things and you'll find out about it than actually great news. I mean, it's the most fascinating thing under the sun. And one of the things that I've actually done, especially with the team, is normally to try and first identify what could have gone wrong. And if there's ever a time where I hear something went wrong, we're more likely either one, the team will make the call to the person that they were dealing with, because we also want to give them an opportunity to deal with whatever issues that they've gotten and build their own special relationship with that person. So they normally would first be that first person to call. And if it's something where we know we've really messed up, I'm one of the few people that always says, I'd rather just receive you screaming at me and telling me how horrible we are than to pretend that never happened. Because if we've done something that we know from our side, because you'll find that there's other basic things. I mean, if you apply as a candidate and you don't have the qualifications or you don't have the right levels or this and that, it's easier from a recruitment point of view to say, we can use the system to actually tell you that you don't have what we're looking for. And that's why we also, in most cases, always have our names on that email that goes out to you, because the idea is to say, however, if you do think we got something wrong, it's okay to just reach out back to us and say, listen, here, you guys got something wrong. And then at the same time, we then also look at where there's specific cases that we are aware, because normally when we mess up, we know we messed up. And then there are those cases that we make sure that there's a priority. We make the call to say, listen, here it was wrong, it was incorrect, my bad, let's do that. And I think we're lucky now we've got a system that whenever we communicate with candidates, it literally gives me a trail of all the activities that we've done. It gives me information about everything that we've communicated with that candidate, what email we've sent, what SMS we've sent, what WhatsApp we've sent, everything that we've done. At least it's there and it's available. So even when we've messed up, I can go read them first and say, "Ooh, guys, here we went the wrong way, and we need to fix that." So prioritizing has always been also one of the things that what I've also realized is I've got an amazing senior recruiter on my team that literally is fantastic. And I think one of the things that I've also learned about having people like that are capable is about being able to take a step back and saying to him, these are the areas that I want you to focus on. I want you to do X, Y, Z, because if I was to do this myself and do this as well and do that and deal with politics and this and that, we will never be able to finish. So it's about being able to say, how do I delegate to very capable people in such a way that they also get their stretch projects and they get excited about what they do. And because of that, I mean, this guy is absolutely fantastic. It's very nice to be able to have him as a partner, because now when you talk about time management, it's about being able to say where I'm not capable of doing something myself, he will always step in. He will always be the first person to step up and say, I will do this, I'll deal with it, I'll let you know what's happened after it's been dealt with. So I think when it comes to time management, to be honest, one of the things that you need to always do is to sometimes believe in what your team is capable of doing, because then your focus can be on exactly what you need to do. And then you let the team actually do other great things and also to stretch themselves in other areas. So stop trying to hold on to things because they sound cool. It doesn't work. I mean, and I think that's what leaders do. Like, we hold on to these cool things and we want to give the teams the bad things. And it's like, no, we don't want to do that. Like, give them the cool stuff as well. Let them enjoy what they're doing as well. Like, don't give them the stuff where it's all about reporting and this and that, and then you come and do the strategic conversations. I'm like, it doesn't work. I mean, as an example, for example, he focuses on any external engagements that we've got. So we invited to hackathons, all these things. It's his responsibility to manage that with all the kind of stakeholders and deal with them and go to these things. If there's an event where it's happening in another place, in another country, let him decide on if he goes or he doesn't go. Whereas I've seen leaders that, they want to go to all the cool places and then they keep you in the, it's like, learn to delegate your responsibilities to people, not based on how important they seem, but based on how they could stretch your team to learn to push themselves. With that, time management becomes a lot easier to actually deal with.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I can't think of a better way to end the conversation, really. I think that was really interesting point to make at the end of it, because I think it's all these things we've talked about, it's not possible to do on your own. You need a great team around you, and to get a great team, it relates to all the recruitment processes and challenges we've been talking through. And I mean, I think it's been awesome to have this conversation with you, Tshidi, today. I think really interesting and great to hear about your background, your drivers to get into talent and what you brought to the table in your roles in Johannesburg and Switzerland, and obviously in the startup situation, which is really exciting. So great to go through this with you. I was going to say, if any of the network wants to reach out to you directly, what's the easiest way they can do that?
LinkedIn. I live on LinkedIn. Like, to be honest, I'm one of those people that in anything that I do, like, I'll have my email open here and there's always a LinkedIn on the one side. Like, that's where I live. I live on LinkedIn, and I think also because I've realized it's the easiest way to connect and talk to people that you don't know. So if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can just search for Tshidi Khunou on LinkedIn. My name, where Tshidi Khunou is a bit tricky. Just search for Top of the Morning. You'll find me. If you search for Top of the Morning, there's a 99% chance that the next post that you'll see will be coming from me. And then let's just connect. Let's have a conversation there.
Yeah, I was going to say it'll be your posts, and then I'd imagine quite a lot of Irish posts in there as well. But I think what we'll do is also put the link, your LinkedIn profile and business in the promotion as well, so it's easy for people to connect to that. But yeah, I guess all that's left for me to say is huge thanks for you to being on the show today. I know, as you say, there's plenty of stuff going on, so to have this time of year has been awesome. I know the network will take a lot from it as well. So yeah, huge thanks, and yeah, I hope everything keeps going in the right direction for you. Really, you keep going with the skiing.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. It's been fantastic, and thank you for giving us the voice. I think we need more of these. We need to connect together as a profession, and I'm really thankful that you were able to bring something like this together. And let's keep working on it together in the future.
Will do. Excellent. Thanks, Tshidi. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.